New York and on the new Hot 97 app. Ebro in the morning on Hot 97.
Ebro in the morning, the beautiful Laura Stiles, Rosenberg, Michael Jackson, Supreme Tea, classic.
You,
And candidate for governor. Am I saying it right? Is that
Yeah.
gubernatorial
candidate.
Cynthia Nixon, give it up. Yes, on the program.
That's me.
True New Yorker.
Yes, lifelong.
So I've been calling you Miranda, and they always go, stop it. And I'll be like, Miranda, and they'll go, stop it. It's Cynthia Nixon. How do you feel about that?
I feel okay.
You're all right with Miranda.
I love Miranda. I'm proud of her. So I respond to both.
Okay.
I respond.
Do you get a lot of Mirandas on the street still to this day, or not anymore?
Not so much anymore. Used to be for a long time, but everybody seems to know I'm running, and they seem to know that Cynthia's running, not Miranda.
Not Miranda.
Right.
So
We're getting there with Ebro. We're
I'm
gonna get
not
there.
there yet.
All right,
I'm not
well,
there.
We'll see in the course of this conversation, hopefully.
Now, there's things I love about what you're doing, right?
Does that mean that there are things you hate about what I'm doing?
I hate. There's nothing I hate.
Okay, good.
There's things when it comes to politics, there's just things I don't believe that will actually get done.
Really?
Yes.
I think
and,
that's, yes.
And you know, I'm 43 years old, and I've heard a lot and seen a lot, and some things get done, and a lot doesn't. I do believe you'll be able to get these marijuana laws
I do too.
accomplished.
I do too, especially since I came out for them near the beginning of our campaign. It seems like
You changed Cuomo's tune quick.
completely, and the New York Department of Health
Yes.
too. Yeah, but last year he was saying marijuana was a gateway drug. Then, as soon as we announced our intention to legalize it, the next day he said the facts on marijuana have changed.
So now,
Wow.
Interesting.
Welcome.
no, he got there quick, and he normally look. I'm not going to say I'm pro Cuomo. I just see him as a normal politician whose dad was a politician. He got in mostly on his name, and he plays this kind of middle ground between conservative and liberal as needed for getting votes.
I don't really feel that's right.
What do you think?
I think that he runs as a Democrat because he's Mario Cuomo's son and because he's in the state of New York, which is a
But he's
2-1
really a
Democratic
Republican.
state. I think he's really Republican. There is,
I guess that's what I meant by this middle ground of like acting like I'm one way, but
right, but I'm not even talking about with voters necessarily. I'm talking about with other electeds. So as soon as he went into office, behind closed doors, he incentivized a group of democratically elected state senators to go over and vote.
Right,
with
what
the
are they
Republicans.
called?
What are those guys called
The
again?
IDC.
yeah, we talk about the
Yeah.
IDC, those
Democratic
scumbags.
Conference,
Yeah.
right? And he also allowed the Republicans in the state Senate to gerrymander their own districting maps. So when he did these two big transfers of power to the Republicans in the state Senate, he basically gave them the ability to block pretty much every progressive priority we've had here.
Which for a state that generally votes Democratic,
Yes, 2-1.
many people are beginning to talk about how not progressive our state is with regard to like raise the age and like you pointed out, the gerrymandering thing,
Right.
with regard to how we're dealing currently with city housing and housing issues.
Reproductive rights.
Reproductive rights, the schooling problems that de Blasio is basically challenging the city on and saying, listen, guys, our school district is segregated.
Yes, very segregated.
Where do you live, by the way,
In the
Cynthia?
country. I live in on Bleecker Street. I live in NoHo.
Okay.
Basically the East Village, but NoHo.
Okay.
By the way, I hate NoHo. I hate the name.
I hear you.
What about Sobro?
Sobro.
I hate that
Sobro, I hate. Sobro, I hate. Spa House, terrible.
Nomad.
What's that?
North of Madison
Avenue, yeah.
Nah,
Yeah.
stop it. Stop it.
Cynthia, but where did you grow up?
I grew up in the Upper West Side and in Yorkville.
Okay.
And really, that's how I've gotten involved in politics because I was a public school grad myself, and I have 3 kids that go to public school. So 17 years ago, when my oldest kid entered kindergarten, and I walked him into school the first day, the school that I walked into was so different than the one I toured and picked for him a few months earlier because of these massive budget cuts that had happened over the summer. And so the school was so different. They had let go of the assistant principal and the art teacher and the music teacher and 2/3 of the paraprofessionals. And I went to a protest that day, and that was how I got involved. And in the months that followed, I joined together with other parents, and we held rallies, and we organized protests, and we met with legislators, and we got arrested. And
She's hype.
And this is 2001-ish?
this is 2001, and in the spring of 2002, because of all the work that we did, we were able to beat back almost $400 million in budget cuts.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so this was the beginning of
This
your
was the
political
beginning
aspirations?
of my political activism on behalf of the schools, because New York schools are the second most unequally funded system in the entire country. Wow. And the thing that what I quickly realized is
One of the richest cities in the country.
exactly.
The rich people do not want to
but
give
I
up.
mean New York State, across New York State.
Wow.
Wow.
We spend $10,000 more per pupil on the kids in our top 100 school districts than we do in our lower 100 school districts. So if you break it down, like in a school of 500 kids, that's a $5 million difference, or in a school of 1,000 kids, that's a $10 million difference. And what I learned very quickly was you could keep fighting the budget year after year, but there was actually a statewide solution called the Campaign for Fiscal Equity, which was a lawsuit that was brought on behalf of the children of New York City, because in our state constitution, we guarantee students a sound basic education. And what the lawsuit said was we're spending so little on so many kids in our lower income districts that they can't possibly receive a sound basic education, and so we're violating their constitutional rights. So this is a lawsuit that wended its way through the courts. We had victory after victory after victory until finally in 2006, I'd been working on it for like 5 years at that point, the highest court in New York, the Court of Appeals, said, yes, you're right, we need to put this money in, and Elliot Spitzer was the governor at the time. And with the Democratic Assembly and the actually really Republican-controlled state Senate at that point, not just through a trick, but actually with a
Legitimately
majority,
Republican.
legitimately Republican, they enacted something called Foundation Aid, which said we need to put $5.4 billion into the schools, and 3/4 of it needs to go to high-needs, low-income school districts. And so
That was how it all started.
But Elliot Spitzer was doing that, and we were halfway there. We were going to ease that $5.4 billion in over 4 years. He was only there for 2 years, so that stopped. And then a combination of Governor Patterson and Governor Cuomo came in, and they each cut 1.2. So it was so we basically we put in 2.4. So sorry, they cut 1.4 and 1.3. So they cut 2.7 billion in 2 years from education. So we erased all that progress we'd made, and then we made the cuts deeper still. And so since Governor Cuomo has been governor and has been refusing to fund foundation, I've been going up to Albany and demanding it with thousands of other parents. And like a lot of women who are running for office this year, I looked at who was in charge and I thought, if I really want this change, I'm going to have to step up myself and bring it.
Well, as Michael once said, the change starts with the man in the mirror. You got to make that change today.
Michael Jackson, the T-shirt. I appreciate the reference.
Yeah, had to.
So, but on that public school issue and what's going on, school choice obviously is a nationwide conversation, right?
Yes.
And a lot of people who make certain amounts of money pay their taxes, do what they got to do, but because they're unhappy with the schools, or they're unhappy with the curriculum, or they're unhappy with the teachers, or they're unhappy with what a lot of individuals who are choosing schools. They may disagree with the greater idea of school choice, but people are choosing schools if they can because they don't believe in the public school system. So you're telling me as governor, you're going to get us all to believe in this?
What we need to do and what we have an obligation to do is make every school a good school. Mm-hmm. And we can do that. We can do that with funding, and we can do that also by when we put the extra money in that our schools are owed, we have to make sure that we're spending that for like a rich curriculum, not just test prep, right? Not just math and English test prep, but science and social studies and art and music and gym. And we also have to, stop the criminalization in our schools of color, because we've got metal detectors and school resource officers.
Preparing them for jail right away.
Completely, school to prison pipeline. And every young person that I speak to that has this in their schools say, I'm told that this is supposed to make me feel safe, but this doesn't make me feel safe. This makes me feel like a criminal from the moment I'm forced to stand for 40 minutes online in the rain and the snow, waiting to get into my school.
That's insane.
It's insane.
Yeah, I grew up with a school like that. I definitely had to go through metal detectors. Yeah. It is the worst way as a high school student to start your day. It just
I can't
puts
even
you
imagine
in a different mind frame.
I had the exact opposite experience in Chevy Chase, Maryland, of like literally, You walked in whenever you walked in, you felt nothing.
Yeah, nah.
It's I can't fathom that.
And the things when we started this conversation, when I said I don't believe you could get everything done, is because the money's the money, right? And when you say budget cuts, usually that means they took money from one budget and reallocated the money somewhere else, right?
Well, in the case of Governor Cuomo, right, he did a $1.3 billion cut to education so that he could give an enormous tax break to corporations and everybody earning over $300,000 a year.
Hence,
Got
you
it.
calling him a Republican, because that is
Hence,
the
I
most
call him a
Republican thing you could possibly do.
Absolutely. And also, there's a reason that when he ran in 2010, the Koch brothers gave him $87,000 because this is the kind of policies that they are in favor of, and that they knew that despite him calling himself a Democrat, that his policies were going to benefit billionaires like them and corporations like theirs. And he's done them proud because he really preaches a sermon of austerity here, and that we don't have enough, but we're actually a really wealthy state, and we have enough if we spend it in the right way and we spend it to address inequality.
So you don't believe that we need to tax the wealthy more to get more money?
I do believe that we need to tax the wealthy more.
All right.
Yeah,
and so that there does need to be some new money coming in.
Absolutely, no question.
Because that's where I go, can you really get it done? Because the businesses and the corporations, they don't want to give up more money. The rich people, they don't want to give up more money either. And so when you go say, hey, we want to pay more for this or we want to do something for that, the money's got to come from somewhere. And usually it's corporations and the rich who usually figure out a way to dodge this because they want their margins to stay high and they want to keep making a lot of money, which we talk about on the show where I often go, listen, guys, if we are who we say we are and we want to make America as great as everybody's claiming they want it to be, it's going to take some money.
Exactly right.
Out of the people who have it to reinvest in the people who currently don't.
But also we got to, are we those of us who call ourselves Democrats, are we really Democrats? Do we really have democratic values? Are we about not only addressing inequity but changing it,
Usually a lot of people are Democrats until their bank account changes,
right,
and then all of a sudden,
elected leaders. But I'm talking about our elected leaders, right? So Andew Cuomo, for example, has $36 million that he's raised to fight this campaign, and he's gotten it overwhelmingly from corporations and people he's appointed to office and people eager to do business with the state of New York, get lucrative state contracts. We've seen so many examples of that in the last few months with the pay-to-play culture. But 0.1% of his contributions have come from in small donor donations.
No, it was a small, what was it, $47 $1 donations from the same
donations,
guy to change his atmosphere, to lower the average and make it look like it was.
But it was still less.
It still didn't happen.
It's still less than 0.1%.
One of the best quotes I've heard from you was, "You'd rather be the good Nixon than the bad Cuomo."
Yes.
Saying he's the bad Cuomo. Were there things growing up in New York, were there things that you admired about his father?
There were things I admired about his father. I certainly think that his stance against the death penalty was really important. And he was and when you look, for example, at how Mario Cuomo, when he felt compelled to make cuts to education, he made them in a staggered way so that the schools that were getting the least money, that they were cushioned from those cuts. When Andew Cuomo makes them, he just makes them across the board. So that means that our least well-funded school districts, not only are they starting with so much less money, but they really feel that cut more deeply.
Speaking of the education part, you said you grew up on the Upper West Side.
Yeah.
I live at 73rd and Riverside.
Yeah.
And that we were covering a story recently that there was this meeting among parents that got pretty passionate because basically they're redistricting to try to even things out as best they can. And on the surface, when you heard that parents are getting upset, you go, oh my God, that's messed up. The parents are just upset because they're putting kids of color in their schools. And on the surface, I'm sure that is a piece of it, which is unfortunate. But then there is another layer where you have people who spend a lot of money to move into neighborhoods to try to get school districts that they thought were ideal.
Littlest, smallest violin in the world, I've got to say.
Oh, is that how you feel about it?
Yeah, we should feel terrible because they spent all this money and that they don't want to go to schools that are integrated.
Well, but what if you said, for example, everyone told you the school at 68th and Broadway was the school that was wonderful, and now they said, well, your kid happens to be the one who we're sending up to 105th and Columbus in a school that's not considered to be as good, even if that's not related to demographics, but surely the performance of the school. I mean, I'm just asking. I don't know. I don't have children yet, but it's something that I'm trying to think about in terms of living in a place like that.
Right, but the bottom line is the schools that are underfunded, they're underfunded because they have not many white children in them, or maybe not any white children at all.
So the key is to get to diversify those
it's
schools.
both. I mean, we have to get funding to every school, but also we can't pretend that just allowing the segregation to remain.
No.
Is gonna be fine.
And this is why I brought up school choice, is because what the scenario he's talking about, right? People want public things, like they want to use public funds for things, but then choose how they want to slice the pie. You live in Manhattan, you live in New York City, right? The public school system, right? Let's say you live in Chelsea.
Right.
You might have public housing right next to your multi-million-dollar condo. That's a part of our city. So to say I don't want to go to said school because it's low performing based on the types of kids that are in there, you're not really subscribing to what we claim New York City's supposed to be about.
And that's why we have to have leadership from our politicians and from our electeds, right? We can't just allow the schools to be so dramatically, some schools have a superabundance of funding and some schools have literally not enough to educate
there shouldn't be
the kids.
schools that are 15 blocks apart, and if you were to look at them, and I'm not even talking about on a racial level, simply what the schools are, you'd go, oh my God, I wouldn't want my child to go there. It shouldn't be a big deal. Like, and when I grew up, if I had not gone to BCC, but I had gone to Whitman or Walter Johnson, it wouldn't have made much of a difference. They were all pretty good
They're public schools. They should all be high
They should all be
performing.
Same
not,
county.
not just if they're within 15 blocks of each other, but around, in every part of the state.
Well, and that's where I say I don't know if you can get that done.
Well,
because
what I'm
I don't
saying-
believe when people walk into that booth to vote, what he's talking about is the conversation at the dinner table. The conversation you're having is everybody's public facing, oh, I'm a great American patriot, but when it comes down to it, people goes, well, I want my kid to go to this school. It's not.
People throw their politics.
I'm not burdened with fixing the city school. That's not my problem.
Especially about people's kids. They go, I don't care about my ideals. I want they might have politically their whole life said they're the biggest liberals. But when it comes down to it, they go, I do feel that way, but nah, I want my kid to be here.
I agree, but that's why we need leadership, right?
To explain these things and sort of help
lead and say, look, this is one state. This is one state. These are all New York's kids. And they all have to go to schools that have adequate funding. And that's what this lawsuit was brought about. And I think it's a measure of how much Andew Cuomo has diminished our expectations of what we can expect from our governor. As I say, Eliot Spitzer, not a perfect man, but a Democratic governor who said, okay, this lawsuit was in the courts for 13 years. They have found it definitively. We are discriminating against the overwhelming number of children in New York, and we have to rectify it.
And then you go, no wonder they outed you about all of the things you had going on behind the scenes, because they were not having that.
Well, that's a very good, because how could
Schneiderman just went through the same thing.
Right.
Yeah, well.
His private life.
Not quite.
But his private life was brought to the forefront while he was right in the middle of holding accountable some very wealthy individuals.
Absolutely.
Not saying he shouldn't be held accountable for his private life.
Right, I'm not sure that's why that came to light. I think that came to light about Eric.
Well, that's my
Schneiderman.
own conspiracy theory.
Well, but I think those women.
Because we currently have a president who has sexual assault allegations.
Yes.
And it doesn't seem like he's being held accountable at all just yet.
He's
so
not.
What are we saying here?
About Eric Schneiderman?
No, just in general about the landscape, about who gets held accountable for their private activities and who doesn't. So it seems so far.
Well, I mean, what's unfortunate to me is it seems that if men, it's mostly men, if men acknowledge that there is some truth, then they go away. Whereas if you're somebody like Donald Trump, who it seems clear he did these things, there are so many women coming forward and testifying. But if you just keep denying it, it's hard to know then what to do unless, the court of public opinion will try you. And the court of public opinion seems ineffective in trying Donald Trump.
But it's crazy with Spitzer. When you look back in retrospect, that Spitzer's out of office for having consensual sex with a prostitute.
Well, it is illegal.
Oh, well, there's that part. But still, morally, not on the worst end. It's consent. And then the standards we have now, though, relative to who's in office currently, it's crazy to me that his career was completely derailed.
It is. It is illegal.
Now, for future reference, if you're governor, I don't think prostitutes are a good idea. I want to put that out here right now. So
Thank you.
I
My
wife
will be really happy to hear that.
it's important. That's why I'm glad this moment. She'll appreciate this moment.
But speaking of public opinion, I'm sure that at a certain point, when you become where are we at now? The primary. Where are we at now in the process? Because I get lost in that. Yes.
The primary. It's very important to make sure everybody knows this. I'm running in the Democratic primary, and that's Thursday, September 13th.
Okay.
That's coming
because
up.
in New York State, it is hard to keep. That's another thing we got to talk about. Why is it so hard to vote? Why is there so many dates?
It is so
many
hard
different
to vote
times?
because our incumbents do not want you to vote. We have some of the least democratic voting laws in the entire country.
Talk about it.
We have no early voting, which is one of the most important things. We have no same day registration. We have no getting 16s and 17-year-olds in line. We are literally the only state that has neither open primaries where you can vote regardless of what party you're in, or an easy way to switch parties shortly before the election. You have to switch, if you want to switch parties, you have to switch parties a year before the election. And
this is crazy.
Who does that? Because
a year.
You would switch your party to vote for somebody, but you don't even know who's running a year in advance. So,
it is so tough. And then you show up and they don't even ask for your license. That's the part that blows my mind. Then you just show up. When you do show up, they're like, "What's your name? Bob? All right, go ahead." I'm like, "What?" It's very confusing. The way things are done, it does just, to your point though, people obviously
New York
don't
State
want
is
to
full
vote.
of crap. Is really one of the things that I found myself saying, and specifically with regard to how dishonest we are about our race issues, how dishonest we are about what really controls our state, which is money and conservatives, how dishonest we are about the ability to vote and things like that. Like, it's really, a lot of it is a farce.
Right.
Are you prepared to deal with, Ebro brings this up a lot, upstate is vastly different than down here. Are you... What plans do you have to sort of appeal? We understand your appeal to people like us down here. What's sort of the Cynthia Nixon plan to win upstate?
Well, first let me say that there are a number of things in common, and certainly education, and actually the poverty in upstate is really, half the kids in our upstate cities live below the poverty line. Syracuse itself has the most concentrated, deepest black and brown poverty of any city in the entire United States.
Yeah.
Wow.
And there's a lot of money that comes in Syracuse around the university and around other things, and a lot of those people don't see any of it.
It's strange. I never knew that.
Exactly.
I never knew
There's
that.
all this top-down economic development that's going in the pockets of our governor's, biggest donors. But when I talk to particularly women and minority business owners, they say they can't get contractors, developers, they can't get anywhere near that money. So investing in education upstate, housing, we're very aware of gentrification and people being pushed out in the city, but it's every bit as bad upstate. And we need rent regulation. We need to not only strengthen our rent regulation and expand it here in the city, but we need to move it across the state, because we need to make housing affordable, and we need to be able to have tenants hold landlords accountable. But really, what we need is investment. We need investment in our communities. We need investment in transportation. We certainly know we need an investment in the New York City subway.
We'll get to MTA.
But also, gentrification is pushing people upstate farther and farther out of the center of things. People who can't afford a car, they can't get to where the jobs are. They can't get to where the schools are. We need a greater investment in transportation that we know will create jobs.
Once again, you're talking about rich people caring. Actually caring about poor people, black and brown.
I'm talking about elected leaders showing leadership and saying New York is a wealthy state. In the last 7 budget cycles, not including this one, we've cut $25 billion in revenue from our state.
And where did it go? Where'd the money go?
It went to tax cuts for the wealthiest and for banks and for corporations.
Subsidized, other people not contributing, is what you're saying.
And so we need to recapture that. We need to recapture it because we're decimating the infrastructure of our state, and we see it in our public housing, and we see it in our SUNY and CUNY systems. We see it in education. We see it. We've lost 57,000 human service jobs across the state, and half of those are in schools, but those are highway workers, and those are people who, run after-school programs and senior centers and rape crisis centers. Human service jobs are the quickest expanding part of our economy, and the thing about those jobs is you can't export them, right? They have to happen on site. They have to happen in the community. We need those jobs as our population ages and as fewer and fewer kids have one parent at home. And the thing about those human service jobs, those are overwhelmingly filled by women and people of color and immigrants, and that's really what our new working class looks like. And so when we talk about working class jobs, we have to think about human service jobs, and we have to make sure that those are provide a living wage and provide benefits.
I will say, because I work with a lot of after school programs myself, and those are the jobs to me that every time I step into a school and I listen to the people who are working, how underfunded they are.
Yeah.
And we see that we need them more than ever, especially in low income areas when kids come from a household of one parent who's working all day. Kids have nowhere to go after school. They hang out in the streets. They get into trouble. And next thing you know, they're headed to Rikers Island.
Right. I mean, and look at how much it costs to incarcerate somebody. I think it costs like $275,000 a year to incarcerate somebody in Rikers Island who hasn't even been to trial, who is legally innocent, who is awaiting trial. And we're spending $22,000 per kid in pre-K, K through 12. Just think about how much money we are hemorrhaging in our justice system, particularly when you think about how many people of color are being entrapped for really minor offenses. We have these wealthy guys on Wall Street who are breaking our global economy with absolutely no consequences to them. And we have particularly, young black and brown people who are being caught up for minor offenses and incarcerated for years.
But that's modern day slavery, but that's also cheap labor, right? So, takes me to marijuana laws, right? Where I firmly believe that, the easy way to fill up the prisons was what you talked about.
War on drugs.
Boom. Which leads to cheap labor, right? Because the corporatization of prisons and et cetera, et cetera. So now marijuana laws are changing around the country.
Yeah.
So you're not locking up these black and brown kids. Instead, they're locking up immigrants at the border.
Yes,
and
that's right.
And that's the new cheap labor,
yes,
right?
That's right.
So Cynthia Nixon steps in and says, we're going to legalize this marijuana thing. Where is the money in it for the small town upstate New York that's entire economy is based around everybody works at the prison?
Well, so one thing I got to say is, we've got a lot of farmland in New York, and cannabis is a really great crop.
It is.
For New York to be growing.
Yes.
And not just for marijuana. There's so many other uses for hemp.
Other uses. Yeah.
CBD is used for so many things, including children who suffer from seizures. I recently I was in Los Angeles and I stepped into a dispensary, and I was really, really impressed when I was like, there's a section for kids, and she was telling me the benefits of CBD for children who suffer from, heavy seizures, how it's changed their lives instead of being addicted to some kind of crazy drugs that they're trying to shove down people's throats.
But if we really take hold of our spending and say, we've got this money, let's invest in things that we want to be investing in, not in prisons, right? Let's invest in renewable energy. So there's this bill in the legislature now, the Climate and Communities Protection Act. This is the most ambitious climate change bill in the entire country. And it says we need to hold corporate polluters accountable when they poison our communities. $35, very modest, $35 per ton of carbon released into our atmosphere. And we do that in the first year alone. That generates $7 billion. And we can use that for a lot of things, including rescuing our MTA. But we can use that to turbocharge a just transition to 100% renewable energy. And we can create 150,000 jobs across the state.
But Cynthia, you're telling me I've been a corrections officer upstate wherever for 20 years. You're telling me I got to learn a new job now? My job's going to go away because now we're not going to be able to lock up these little boys at 16, 17 years old, these little boys and girls for selling a bag of weed? That's what
I'm telling you. That's what I'm telling you.
But
there are better businesses to be in.
Right, but that is the problem with many politicians, is they are not willing to tell people where the economy's going to change. Mm-hmm. They are not willing to say these cold jobs, hey guys, we appreciate you. You've done a phenomenal job.
They're not coming back, though.
They're not coming back,
That's what
guys.
Trump has lied to everyone. These jobs are coming back. No,
but that is a fundamental issue we're dealing with many Democrats.
Yeah. Is
this glad handing, talking about the numbers are great. Where are the jobs? Mm-hmm. Where are my kids going to school? And where are the jobs?
Right, but you can create jobs through investment.
I get it. I hear you.
And we've got billions of dollars being spent on economic development, particularly upstate, and we've got very little to show for it because it just went into the pockets of Andew Cuomo's biggest donors. And that's why it's important that people like me, people like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez are running for office.
Socialists.
And we're not accepting any corporate contributions. You know what Martin Luther King said?
What did he say?
He said you can call it democratic socialism or you can call it democracy, but what it means is we need to do a better job distributing wealth across this country to all of God's children. That he said God's children. I would
and
say
so
to all
when
of our people.
When they call you a socialist,
yeah,
that'll be your response. A Martin Luther King quote.
My response is that this is, if what democratic socialism is, that housing is a human right, that healthcare is a human right, that justice is a human right, that education is a human right, then yes, call me a democratic socialist. Because we need a sea change in our country and we need a sea change in our Democratic Party because the influence of corporations and big money in politics, that is nothing new.
And see, that's the piece right there. You got to the piece. The piece is the fact that no one is able to capture and deal directly with the reality of if you actually believe that this American thing is going to work, we have to invest in our middle class, our lower middle class, our children. Mm-hmm. That's our future, right? And if you're not seeing that investment being made, the problem is the leadership. But that conversation requires a responsibility on everyone, the rich as well as the people who are poor, saying, listen, I'm ready to do the work to make this place the place we all believe it can be. And I just don't believe that that's where we are today. I don't believe that people are ready to confront that.
So what do you...
I love everything you're saying, and I would probably vote for you when we get to the time. But I just don't honestly believe that the greater population has enough wherewithal and responsibility on themselves to do the work you're saying needs to be done.
But what I'm saying is we've got a lot of wealthy people, and they have more money than I've ever seen wealthy people have in my lifetime. And even though there are a lot of them, there is a lot more of everybody else.
That's right.
And the problem that our politicians have is they're listening to their donors and not their voters.
That's right.
And so we actually, particularly people who call themselves Democrats, people who call themselves progressives, we're so far ahead of our elected leaders. And that's why people are running for office for the first time this year who have never done it before, because our electeds and our previous candidates are not meeting voters where they are. And like you say, Donald Trump lied to people. He lied to people about bringing coal jobs back and a whole host of things. And he did a lot of racist, xenophobic, misogynistic, dog whistles. But the fact of the matter is he was talking about inequality and he was aware that it existed. And that is something that are far more well-meaning politicians, because they are so co-opted by big money, they're not doing it. They're not talking about inequality. And we have to talk about inequality and we have to change the inequality because it is swallowing our democracy whole.
You just mentioned President Trump. I am guessing he has had interactions, it seems like, with every notable New Yorker of the last 30 years. I would find it almost impossible that during the Sex and the City years, you never had any interactions with Trump, did you?
Yeah, no, he appeared in, I think, one of the Sex and the City movies, I'm pretty sure, but he also gave me, I have 2 Emmys, he gave me the first one.
He handed it to you.
He handed it to me. He looked really longingly at it, and then he handed it to me.
Yeah,
Because, he never got one himself. So sometimes I think if I just let him have it, maybe we wouldn't be in this mess.
Well, I guess here's my next question. He's tweeted about you.
Yes.
And when I saw it and I saw you respond, I said, interesting. So he sees a Democratic war taking place, if you will, for lack of a better term, a Democratic competition in a very important state of New York. And he's going to go after the new girl and give her some light to hopefully fracture whatever Cuomo control
I'm
he has.
not sure what you saw that he said. I mean, I got slammed by
No, he got
Pence
slammed
about ICE. And,
No, all of that. But all of that, he knows, and I know because I work in media. The fact that he said your name means that he's not only comfortable because he doesn't feel like you're a real threat, but he's also okay because Democrats run New York State. So if he causes a public skirmish over there, maybe it'll work in favor of his interests at some point. He's that savvy.
Yeah. I think he's just throwing red meat to his base, frankly. But
You think it's that simple?
yeah, I think it's that simple. I think I said that I should be abolished, and I think that he thinks that if he responds to that, that's red meat for his base.
Interesting.
So is that the only thing he referred to, was your stance on ICE?
I believe so.
Yeah, I think so.
I believe so.
I think so.
Yeah,
Because you got heat because you called it a terrorist organization,
I did.
correct?
I did.
Can you talk about that a little more?
Sure. I mean, the ICE has strayed so far from their mission. Their mission is they're supposed to be keeping America safe, right?
Right.
But instead,
Well, they are. They're arresting these criminals who came here for a better life with their children.
right, and tearing them apart.
And are working and trying to pay taxes. They're
Right.
the people we should be concerned about.
Right, and that they're literally spreading terror. That so many people across the country and across New York State live in not just daily fear, but moment to moment fear that there's going to be a knock on the door and one or both of the parents in that household are gonna disappear. And there is so much that we could be doing in New York State to protect our undocumented people that we're not doing. Because of the Republicans that Andrew Cuomo has empowered in the state Senate. We haven't passed the New York Dream Act. We haven't passed the Liberty Act to stop our law enforcement from cooperating with ICE. And most importantly, the governor, this is something that I'll do in my first week in office, the governor, by executive order, can expand access to driver's licenses for all undocumented people. And to do that would be a complete sea change, because not having a driver's license is the number one way that ICE is racially profiling people who are at the wheel, stopping them for minor traffic stops, asking for a driver's license. You don't have one, why not? Oh, you're undocumented. This is the number one way, the path through which people are getting deported. And if we used to have, prior to September 11th, we let everybody have a driver's license who knew how to drive, regardless of their immigration status. If we did this again, if we were really concerned with protecting our undocumented people and fighting against Donald Trump, this is something that we have to do. We make a lot of Andrew Cuomo makes a lot of noise about how, we're combating the Trump agenda, but there are such basic things that he has not bothered to do.
Because he's not really that progressive to our
He's not
earlier-
really that progressive. And, sometimes I look at him and I think he's not even running for governor of New York State. He's running for president. He's forgotten about us already. And he's just thinking, well, if I offer driver's licenses to undocumented people, maybe that would put me in a bad position when I...
On a national scale.
On a national scale. But, but the thing is, the governor of New York should be concerned first and foremost with New York and with protecting all our people and with solving all our problems and addressing our injustice and our inequality, rather than playing it safe and, as you say, playing both sides of the aisle to maximize his campaign contributions from Democrats and Republicans both.
Do you enjoy, how much do you enjoy this life versus your former life as an actor?
You know, it's very, I mean, I loved my life as an actor, but it's very inspiring. It's very inspiring to have people come up to you and tell you about the most intimate details of their life. Sometimes they're joys, but more often they're heartaches. And particularly as, you know, we're rolling out our justice platform today, and I've met with so many people who've formerly incarcerated people and who have, you know, I know Akeem Browder has been on your show, and I've met with him a number of times, and really, you know, try to understand what it's like to be arrested on a minor offense, particularly, you know, something that a person who looks like me would never be stopped by the police, much less arrested. And there are so many things that we need to do here in New York. Not only legalizing marijuana, which is really important, it would have an enormous impact, particularly if you did marijuana equity and you prioritize the communities that have been most harmed to profit then from the legal sale.
Which, by the way, we totally agreed with you, and you said that. I know it got taken a different way at first,
That's all
but
right. That's all right.
I think they made a lot of sense.
We called bullshit to everybody who actually was trying to call. It was like, relax, guys.
Thank you.
Calm
But we
down.
also, obviously, I mean, we need to end cash bail in New York State.
Doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't make any sense. We've got, on any given day, we've got 25,000 people in New York's jails. 70% of them are there awaiting trial, legally innocent, because they can't afford bail.
because
They're
they're
there
poor.
because they're poor, right?
Well, it's a racket, though.
Yeah.
It's a complete racket. And the thing about it is, well, people say, well, if you got rid of bail, then how would you...
But Cynthia, it goes again. Here we go again. And I know the justice reform plan, you rolling it out, and I love it. But here we go again. There's literally industry around this racket,
Yeah.
which is our justice system.
Yeah.
How many? These are jobs that people have spent their lives. I'm a bail bonds, CEO, privatized jails, whatever it is, whatever the job is. When you start to clean this stuff up, people start to go, where's my job going? I agree with you, but I'm just saying.
Right. If we take the, as I say, $275,000 to incarcerate somebody in Rikers awaiting trial. I mean, think about the job creation that we can do. Think about all the jobs that we could create if we invested in renewable energy. Think about all the jobs we could create.
So you telling me I gotta
if
go
we
back to school?
transition
I gotta go get a new
single-payer law
job? I gotta
school.
go get a new job, Cynthia? I gotta go to school again? But these are real conversations that people, when the whole Trump thing was happening, we took phone calls from truck drivers who was like,
Yeah.
yo, he said I was gonna get more money. When the tax thing, when he was like, oh, a tax plan, people were like, look, at the end of the year, I'm getting $1,500 extra. I'm in. But that's what as you try to be progressive and
Yeah.
bring new ideas, you're up against people who are literally living check to check,
Yeah.
right? Have worked in certain industries for, generations sometimes, let alone 20 years of their life. And you're telling them that what I do for a living is going to become like obsolete. I don't know if I like this. Only because as a human being, these humans who are voters can only think so far out. Mm-hmm. So as we started our conversation where it was like, I like everything you're saying. Mm-hmm. I just don't know if we can get there. And I want to get there. I'm prepared to get there. When Trump, how many times on the radio, I was like, look, you guys can vote Trump in as president if you want. In my tax bracket, I'm going to be okay. But I'm going to tell you right now, don't do it. Don't do it. You don't want this. This is not what you want. You don't want this, and here we are.
But she doesn't have to convince every single person to understand these things to win the election. You have to convince enough people, and
I
then
have to convince, first and foremost, enough Democratic primary voters who are the most informed and the most left-leaning and the most informed about things like the IDC and the most aware of the incredible inequity, the incredible inequality and injustice, and how much we could be doing in New York, because that's the thing, is New York should be the rightful seat of the resistance, right? The place we should really be combating the Trump agenda.
Yeah.
Listen.
California's getting all the glory. That's not
Yeah.
right.
Right.
We've got New York pride. And we really...
Well, de Blasio, I think, despite his problems with NYCHA and despite, him getting the homeless issue, housing crisis tag and all those things, I think he's tried to do some right things. Mm-hmm. And he's got caught up in the blender recently, and he hasn't really come to talk to us. So if you're watching this, don't be scared to come talk to us, because we'll have a real conversation. And we've been supportive of him, right? And I know you guys are colleagues, right? But New York City and upstate is two different worlds. And do you believe that upstate is going to believe you have their interests at heart?
I do, because New York City, we're so focused on ourselves. We're very, myopic that way. But really, when you go upstate, they're much more focused on Albany. They're much more focused on the state as a whole and Governor Cuomo. And they're keenly aware of the ways in which he's let them down economically and every other way. And so, this woman, Zephyr Teachout, ran for governor 4 years ago. I don't know if you've ever heard of her, but she had really low name recognition. She didn't raise a lot of money. She didn't enter the race till June. She couldn't get on TV until the last 2 weeks because nobody took her candidacy seriously. She won 34% of the vote. She won half the counties in New York, and the vast majority of where she won was upstate, because that's the level of dissatisfaction they have with this governor and this administration in terms of looking out for upstate.
Based on that research, you feel like people are ready?
I do. I do. And Donald Trump wasn't even in the White House now, the 4 years ago.
That exacerbates the whole.
It does. Yeah. It makes New Yorkers really, people are, if you pardon the expression, woke. People are woke because of Donald Trump. And people are getting involved in politics, both as candidate, but also as, just people who are supporting candidates and door knocking and phone banking and doing all that stuff, because with Donald Trump in the White House, it's everybody, there's no more time for people being on the sidelines. And in a place like New York, we have such a chance to lead this country in the right direction by example.
Your reform plan that you're rolling out today, cash bail is a part of it.
And ending cash bail, ensuring a right to speedy trial, ensuring a right to discovery.
Okay.
Holding police much more accountable, demanding much more transparency. We need, when someone dies in police custody, we need those officers' names released within 48 hours. I'm also supportive and want to pass the Police Stat Act, which says that police need to start keeping records of who they're stopping, the demographics, the ethnicity, the race, the gender, the age, who they're stopping, who they're arresting for minor infractions, who's dying in police custody. Because also we see with so many of the really terrifying, shootings and killings that we've seen by police of unarmed civilians, they've often been stopped for the most minor infractions or even stopped for no reason at all. So we know how unequally we police people when it comes to race, and how unequally we arrest them and hold them in prison and jail. But we need the hard statistics to actually then change the system and to reverse the system. And we need to take, minor offenses like selling loosies, like being in a park after dark, like having an open container, riding your bike on the sidewalk, all of these.
What do they call that, like broken windows policing?
Broken windows policing. We've got to stop this. That we are just capturing so many people of color in our criminal justice system, and we're holding them and we're not letting them go.
Do you have a little extra chip on your shoulder when you hear about things like that? Reportedly, Governor Cuomo came up with vote for Cuomo, not the homo. I mean, is there a little bit of an extra chip on your shoulder?
What?
Wait,
Yeah.
I haven't even heard that.
When Cuomo and Koch ran against each other in
Mario Cuomo,
when
yes.
Mario Cuomo's father ran against Ed Koch in 1977, it was reportedly his son, who was working for him, who came up with the idea of the slogan, vote for Cuomo, not the homo, back then. And then you guys made a play on it.
She's laughing.
We did. We have some T-shirts.
You made some
What do your
t-shirts.
T-shirts say? Wait, time out.
We haven't made some T-shirts, but some of our supporters have been.
What was the t-shirt they made? The supporters? Your supporters?
Vote for the homo, not for the Cuomo.
No, they just flipped it.
Yeah.
But does it give you a little bit of an extra chip on your shoulder? And there was some talk early on, too, that like, I don't want to get confused and mess it up, but I remember that at the beginning of your campaign, it seemed like there were people specifically finding ways to talk about your sexuality in a sort of covert way that seemed like it was coming from.
Yes, I was the first day of the campaign. I was labeled an unqualified lesbian.
Yes, the unqualified lesbian. Of course, how could I forget that terminology?
Unqualified
We have buttons
lesbian.
that say that too.
Okay, got it.
We
So
do.
does it give you a little extra chip on your shoulder though when you hear about things like that are actually pretty bad?
Name calling. Name calling is name calling. The stuff that really gets under my skin, though, is the fact that our schools are still underfunded and so unequally funded after all these years, and that he just denies it. He just says over and over, we spend more on schools than any other state in the country. And that's true because we spend so much in our wealthy districts. That's the kind of thing that really gets under my skin.
New York City public housing.
Yeah.
For generations, we're gonna fix it. We're gonna fix it. We're gonna do this. We're gonna do that. We're gonna do this. And every so many years, we find out that A, nothing's been done, and B, people have lied about things that we thought were being done.
Yeah.
Right, which is what we're living in right now.
Right.
Part of the New York City public housing thing is the fact that wage increases and the ability for people who live in public housing, who are hardworking individuals and want to earn more, get more to maybe one day move out, right, and buy a home or, do other things. That has been stagnant in that's not a New York State problem. That's kind of like a national housing problem.
How rents are skyrocketing and wages are flatlined.
Right.
For so many people.
For a lot of people. How are you going to address that?
So what you say is absolutely true. It's not just the last 8 years, but for a few decades now.
Yes.
Not only the state, not only the city, not only the feds have just completely underfunded and deserted and abandoned our public housing effectively. Mm-hmm. We need to make an investment. I think having the federal monitor here in New York for our public housing, I think is hopefully a step in the right direction. But we have to be sure that when we need to make a greater investment, all of us do, state, city, federal, but that, what Andew Cuomo did the last time he made a major investment is he broke it up in little parcels and he doled it out to different elected leaders so that they could bring home the bacon for their district. But what it meant was there was no ability then to do wholesale renovation. It was like, here's some money. And they suggested, you could use this to build a playground, or you could use this to plant a garden or do better lighting, all of which are nice. Cosmetic improvements are nice, but we needed that money to be given wholesale so we could do the most pressing issues like replacing the boilers or fixing the roofs that are leaking, or addressing the mold, or addressing the lead paint. These things that are really, when I walked around in public housing and talked to people, I could feel it in my lungs for literally a couple days afterwards. I mean, it's really, it's not just that it's falling down. It's a hazard. It's a hazard to your health. I talked to a woman who's told me the story of her grown daughter dying of an asthma attack. The asthma rates in public housing are through the roof. It's because they're such unhealthy places to live, between the mold and the asbestos and everything.
So it sounds like your campaign slogan should be, Cynthia Nixon, I expect you to care too, because you are placing a lot of emphasis on voters and even the greater population to pay attention to. If we are going to be who we say we want to be, we all have to pay attention and be ready to do this work, and even deeper than that, make the financial investment.
Yeah, and make the financial investment in our state and in our future, because if we keep going this way, not only is the inequality just going to expand and expand and expand and get worse and worse and more terrifying, but we're disinvesting in our state, in our housing and in our transportation and in our roads and in our schools.
And in our education and our future workers.
Exactly. And, we have a lot of wealth here. We have a lot of wealthy people. We've got a lot of great industry and natural resources. But people like to live in New York because it's a nice place to live. And if we keep going in this direction, every year it's going to become less and less nice. And nobody's going to want to stay here, and nobody's going to want to move here. But if we invest in New York, it's an incredible oasis, New York, in so many ways, but not if we don't fund it, not if we don't invest in it and invest in our people.
Cynthia Nixon, a.k.a. Miranda. Cynthia Nixon.
What's the date for the election?
September 13th.
That's the primary.
Thursday.
That's what
Thursday.
matters. September 13th.
Yeah.
All right. And then there's probably like 9 other dates and things you got to pay attention to, but we'll get into
The
that
most
in
important one, though, is
September
Cuomo on
13th.
September 13th.
There you go. Thank you very much for your time
so
today.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.